Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, um, I always find it fascinating how a seemingly simple real estate story can spiral into something much bigger. That's exactly what we're looking at today with your deep dive request, a property dispute in Margate, New Jersey that's got everyone talking. From what I'm seeing in these articles, there's a whole lot more going on beneath the surface than just a disagreement about a building permit.
You're absolutely right. It's a microcosm of so many issues we grapple with. Property rights, zoning laws, the power of local politics, and those sometimes thorny community dynamics.
Okay, so let's set the scene for our listeners.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a piece of land on North Rumson Avenue, and it's tiny. One article even described it as the size of a large driveway. It's been deemed unbuildable since 1979, but it does come with a dock and private parking, which, as you can imagine, only adds fuel to the fire.
That's a crucial detail. See, those existing features make the hardship exemption argument, which the applicants leaned on, a bit trickier. For those unfamiliar, a hardship exemption essentially allows a property owner to bypass certain zoning restrictions if they can prove that those restrictions create an undue burden.
So in this case, the applicants, who happen to be the daughter and son-in-law of the property owner, were claiming that the unbuildable status of a lot severely limited their options.
But the neighbors weren't convinced, right?
Not at all. They argued that the applicants knew full well what they were getting into when they purchased the property. There was no bait and switch here. They went into it with their eyes wide open. And this brings us to another layer of intrigue in this story, the property owner himself.
Let's talk about him. The owner of this unbuildable waterfront lot is Max Rocks, LLC, a company jointly owned by none other than Margate City Solicitor John Scott Abbott and his wife, Joanne, who happens to be a real estate agent. Talk about a potential conflict of interest. The optics certainly aren't great, and the neighbors were quick to point that out, especially when you consider that Abbott bought the lot for $75,000 back in 2015. A neighbor offered $200,000, but he's holding out for $600,000.
Wow, that's a hefty profit margin.
It is, and that's why the neighbor suspected this whole application was more about personal gain than a genuine hardship. They claimed they had been assured the lot would never be developed, and they saw this as a blatant disregard for their trust and the established character of the neighborhood.
So what were their specific concerns about the development? Were they worried about property values plummeting, or were there other issues at play?
Their concerns were multifaceted. They argued that cramming a house onto a 30-foot lot would be a visual eyesore completely out of sync with the neighborhood's aesthetic. They also cited the master plan, which requires a 50-foot lot width, arguing that this development would set a dangerous precedent for future zoning variances. And of course, the financial aspect added fuel to the fire.
Let's not forget about the legal representation. Attorney Chris Bailenson was tasked with representing Abbott's daughter and son-in-law. He must have known going into that planning board meeting that he had a tough case to argue.
He did. Bailenson focused heavily on the hardship exemption, emphasizing the lot's unique characteristics and arguing that his clients had no other viable options. But the opposing side countered by stating that the applicants weren't exactly victims of circumstance. They knew the limitations of the lot when they purchased it. It's not like they were misled or deceived in any way.
The articles you shared mentioned that the planning board meeting was quite contentious, with several members recusing themselves due to potential conflicts of interest.
Yes. 3 members stepped down, likely to avoid any appearance of impropriety, given John Scott Abbott's position as city solicitor. This left the remaining board members with a significant decision to make. They had to weigh the applicants' arguments against the vehement opposition from the neighbors and the potential impact on the community as a whole.
It sounds like they were caught between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly. They had to consider the legal aspects, the community's concerns, and the potential ramifications of their decision. And speaking of the decision, there was one particular board member whose vote raised a few eyebrows. That board member was Tom Collins, father of Margate Mayor Mike Collins. His presence on the board, deciding on a case involving the city solicitor's family, added yet another layer of complexity to an already tangled situation.
So we've got potential conflicts of interest, accusations of profiteering. This is starting to feel like an episode of a small-town drama series. What happened next?
Well, despite Bailenson's best efforts to sway the board, the Margate Planning Board voted 6-1 to deny the application. And guess who the lone yes vote was?
Let me guess. Tom Collins.
You got it. That vote, along with the recusals and the family ties involved, really fueled public scrutiny.
I can imagine. It's a small town, and those kinds of connections are bound to raise questions about fairness and impartiality.
Absolutely. And this case also brought to light the often overlooked issue of assessed value versus market value.
Could you explain that a bit further for our listener? I'm sure many people aren't familiar with the nuances of real estate valuation.
Certainly. The assessed value is what the local government determines a property is worth for tax purposes. It's often based on factors like location, size, and comparable properties in the area. In this case, the assessed value of Abbott's lot was significantly lower than his asking price. It was assessed at $177,400, with the land valued at $172,200, and the improvements, which I assume include the dock, at just $5,200.
So he bought it for $75,000. A neighbor offered $200,000. The assessed value is under $180,000, and he's asking for $600,000. It sounds like he's aiming for a pretty substantial profit.
That's one interpretation. And remember, this is all happening against the backdrop of Margate's changing landscape. Like many coastal communities, it's facing increasing development pressure, which often pits individual property rights against the desire to preserve the existing character of a neighborhood.
The articles you shared mentioned that the neighbors were particularly concerned about the impact on their visual integrity. What exactly did they mean by that? Was it just about aesthetics, or was there something more to it?
It's a great question, and it reveals a lot about how people perceive their surroundings. In this case, the neighbors argued that the proposed house squeezed onto such a narrow lot would be jarringly out of place. They weren't just concerned about their view being blocked. They felt it would disrupt the overall harmony and visual flow of the street.
It's interesting how something as seemingly subjective as visual integrity can become such a powerful argument in a zoning dispute.
It's incredibly powerful. It speaks to our innate desire for a sense of order and coherence in our physical environment. And for many people, that sense of order is deeply tied to their sense of community and belonging.
That makes sense. If you've lived in a place for years and suddenly a development pops up that feels completely out of sync with the surroundings, it's understandable that you'd feel a sense of disruption.
Precisely. And this case highlights the challenges faced by communities that are trying to balance the rights of property owners with the preservation of their unique character. It's a delicate balancing act, and there's rarely a solution that satisfies everyone.
Speaking of solutions, the planning board may have denied the application. But does that mean this story is over?
Not necessarily. The applicants still have the option to appeal the decision. Or perhaps, given the public scrutiny and the potential for a protracted legal battle, they might decide to sell the property, maybe to one of the neighbors who previously expressed interest.
The whole saga feels very Shakespearean. You have family drama, financial motivations, power dynamics, and the clash between individual ambition and the collective good.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a story that transcends the specifics of this one property and touches on universal themes that resonate with all of us.
And what about the failing bulkhead that was mentioned in one of the articles? Did that play a significant role in the planning board's decision?
That's where things get even more intriguing. A failing bulkhead not only presents potential environmental concerns, but also raises questions about property maintenance and liability. Remember, the neighbors had offered Abbott a lower price than he was asking, citing the estimated $75,000 cost of repairs.
So it wasn't just about aesthetics and zoning regulations. There were also practical considerations and potential safety issues involved. It's a reminder that even the smallest piece of land can become a battleground for competing interests and values.
Absolutely. And it also highlights the importance of transparency and due diligence in any property transaction. Whether you're buying, selling, or simply living in a community, being aware of these issues and engaging in informed discussions can help shape a more equitable and sustainable future for everyone.
So what do you think was the planning board's primary motivation in denying the application? Was it purely about adhering to zoning regulations, or were they swayed by the neighbors' concerns about their visual integrity and Abbott's perceived profiteering?
It's impossible to say for sure what was going through the minds of each board member. They likely weighed a multitude of factors, including the legal arguments presented, the community's concerns, and their own personal interpretations of what constitutes responsible development.